So all of a sudden, it kind of starts to feel like 2020 again.
I want to be clear in how I characterize this. This is mostly a protest. It is not. It is not, generally speaking, unruly. But fires have been started.
Right, a black man is quote unquote killed by the police, and a bunch of narratives are created about it. Now, the difference between 2020 and now is that there are not thousands of people protesting and or rioting, and I have had my thoughts and opinions about that. I've always said it before, is that there are people who run the show who kind of control everything, and right now they have no reason for us to be in the streets and demonstrate or burn stuff down. It's just not necessary for them right now. So something like this will happen, but it'll kind of fall under the radar after like a week or two. But nonetheless, it still happened, and I think is worth talking about. A black man in Los Angeles, California was tased a number of times by police, and then later he died a few hours after the incident. And the person on every headline is the cousin of BLM founder Patrisse Cullors. Her cousin's name is Keenan Anderson. So he was in Los Angeles and had a run-in with the police. Now, the narrative is that he was flagging the police down and trying to get help because there was an accident that occurred, and the cops are just racist and had nothing better to do, so they tackled him and then tased him repeatedly, and then he died in the hospital later as a result of that. That's at least what I'm seeing, right? I'm summarizing it. Obviously, they're going into more detail, but that's just the gist of it, is that he did that, and he was begging for his life and asking them to stop and calling for help, and because they're racist, they just don't care. Therefore, one thing leads to another, and this individual has lost his life. What I will say is that it's unfortunate. Regardless of how it happens, it always sucks and it always stings to my core whenever anybody dies, especially when it's a situation that seems like it could have been prevented. But the details surrounding this are so off, because it is being used to perpetrate a specific narrative that paints police officers in a certain light, regardless of what actually happened. So I'm just going to use this time to go over the actual details of what happened, because once again, it is highly offensive. I don't get offended that easily, but it is highly offensive when the media or the powers that be use real African American struggle to push forth their agenda, whatever that may be, simply because they know that this is a soft spot for the vast majority of black people. If they hear that a black person had a run-in with a police officer or police officers and then end up dying for whatever reason, the first thought that comes to your head is that these were racist police officers and that they killed them because they had nothing better to do. Now, that was not the case here, right? There's body cam footage, there are reports, there were people there who just tell a completely different story. And I'm going to go through that right now. But before I do, I'm just going to lay the foundation for why it is that I'm doing this. The Guardian, they put out an article. The headline reads, "Teacher and cousin of Black Lives Matter founder tased to death by LAPD. He needed help and was killed," says Patrisse Cullors, as police are seen repeatedly using stun gun on him after traffic accident. A cousin of Black Lives Matter co-founder Patrisse Cullors was killed by Los Angeles police after he got in a traffic accident, and officers who showed up repeatedly tased and restrained him in the middle of the street, according to body cam footage and his family's account. Only one half of that statement is true. The body cam footage shows something completely different, but I'll just keep going. Footage from the January 3rd encounter released on Wednesday showed that Keenan Anderson, a 31-year-old high school teacher and father, was begging for help as multiple officers held him down, and at one point said, "They're trying to George Floyd me." One officer had his elbow on Anderson's neck while he was lying down before another tased him for roughly 30 seconds straight before pausing and tasing him again for 5 more seconds. It goes on to say, "My cousin was asking for help and he didn't deserve it. He was killed," Cullors told The Guardian after watching the LAPD footage. "Nobody deserves to die in fear, panicking and scared for their life. My cousin was scared for his life. He spent the last 10 years witnessing a movement challenging the killing of black people. He knew what was at stake and was trying to protect himself. Nobody was willing to protect him. Now, once again, the situation is completely unfortunate, and I have empathy. I'm a human being, regardless of my thoughts on it or whatnot and how I feel like the reporting is going. I'm a human being. I have empathy. It is unfortunate. With that being said, the reporting around this is so faulty and so purposefully misleading, and we'll just go through why. So the article tries to describe it as he got into an accident and called the police and asked them for help, and then they just kind of got on him because they're racist and they have nothing better to do. Well, according to body cam footage and eyewitness accounts, he's the one who caused the accident.
Driver? Get off to the side here. Get on the street.
So everyone in the vicinity is saying that he caused the accident. And these articles are saying that he flagged the police down to report an accident, basically. But that's not what is being said. And there's body cam footage to show it. They're saying he caused the accident, and then the police are trying to approach him as a result. There was even somebody there, I think he was an Uber driver, who claimed that this guy tried to steal his car. Now, I'm not trying to paint him in a bad light. I am just going based off of what the body cam footage is displaying, right? Which seems to be omitted from the vast majority of these reports, because then it just kind of blows up in everybody's face, at least the people who are reporting it this way. But the footage is there, and here it is.
Hey guys, that guy right there, he caused that accident. He was trying to steal my car.
Now, before they even got him on the ground and the guy was saying that he was trying to steal his car, they went up to him to try to talk to him to see what actually happened. They asked him to get over on the sidewalk, and they approached him. You can hear the police officer ask, "What happened?"
The car. Okay, what happened? I lost my key. You lost your key? Yes. I came and I had somebody fix my car for me, sir. Please, please, okay, sir. Do me a favor. Sit down on your butt and sit with your legs crossed.
Now, back in 2015, there was this person, Dylan Roof, I think his name is. He shot up a church in Charleston, and everybody was pissed because the police officers, I think, bought him Burger King or something like that, which is a very weird thing to do, like to arrest somebody for shooting up a place and then buying them food. Is very, very weird to me, but people were angry about it, and I get it. But then in this scenario, in this situation that happened with Keenan Anderson, he asked for some water, and the police even went as far as to offer him that. Hey, if you calm down, we'll get you some, right? I know it might not be on the same level as Burger King, but still, right? Like, my point is that they're trying to work with him every step of the way. At least that's what it looks like. And here it is.
Here. Stay here. Sir, I need some water. Can you get some water? Please. Stay here. I'll get you some water here in a second, okay? Please. Just have a seat up against the wall there.
He then began to walk into the street, walk away from the police, and they're constantly telling him to come here, obviously, so that they can, talk to him and figure out what's going on. Yet he is constantly walking away from them, going into the street, regardless of their instruction to come here. Here's that.
Come here. Come here.
Eventually, they get to him. They get him down on the ground, and they're trying to put him in cuffs. And he's resisting. And they repeatedly tell him that they're going to tase him if he does not stop resisting. He does not stop resisting. Therefore, they proceed to tase him. And in the process of it, he is screaming that they are trying to George Floyd him. And I have a very, very, very strong issue with that. But I will just let you look at this real quick, and then we'll talk about it.
Hey, buddy, help me. Help. Help. Stop it. I'm going to tase you. You're trying to George Floyd me. You're trying to George Floyd me.
After they were able to get him in cuffs, they eventually took him in, and he unfortunately died 4 hours later of cardiac arrest. Now, the headline is going to say, and the tweets are going to say, that the police officers excessively tased him, and he died 4 hours later because of that. But what they're not going to tell you is that he also had cocaine in his system and marijuana in his system. Now, I'm no doctor, I'm no coroner, so I'm not going to say it was definitively him being tased that killed him, or him having cocaine and marijuana in his system that killed him. What I would think is that it was a combination of both, is that he has this stuff in his system, and in comparison with being tased, unfortunately, his heart gave out. And yes, it is unfortunate. But like I said, I have a problem with how this is being reported for obvious reasons. And then like what he's saying, in the sense that they're going to George Floyd me. There's two main problems with it, right? The first one is how, like, no one is ever really satisfied with how the police operate until they are, like, abolished. But then when they're abolished and you are dealing with an issue, let's say it's domestic violence, you call a social worker, they're going to come there and talk about everyone's feelings instead of dealing with the crime at hand, right? Instead of just addressing issues within the police department in regards to training, no, people will not be satisfied until the police department is completely abolished. Because before it was like, well, why do police officers have to use guns, right? Like, why, even if they do use guns, why can't they just shoot somebody in the leg? Now, if you've ever shot a gun before, or if you understand how these interactions work, it is not as simple as that, right? You have moving targets, and you have to assess a threat in the moment. So when you are trying to neutralize somebody, not necessarily kill them, but just kind of stop them from pressing on, the safest bet for these officers is to shoot in the upper body because it has the biggest surface area. Trying to shoot somebody in the leg, yes, it would be fantastic if that was the case, if it got to that point, but that opportunity doesn't always present itself so plainly. So the argument then becomes, well, why do you need to use a gun, right? Just use a taser. Because I heard that so many times back in 2014 after the Michael Brown situation. Why not just use a taser? 2020, why not use a taser? Like every single time one of these videos comes out, it is always the exact same thing. Why not use a taser? Okay, well, they use a taser now, and people are still not happy. Now, I get it. It's pretty self-explanatory in the sense that he ended up dying, right? Now, once again, to definitively say that it was because he was tased, I feel like it is very biased in regard to just hating police, right? And just wanting to assert that they are racist and they are responsible for things like this because they use a taser and they are still met with backlash as a result. Now, what I will say is that in these situations, yes, the police do hold the majority of the responsibility. They are in a position where they can, quote unquote, use force. And a lot of the times it can result in a lethal conclusion. So yes, they hold the bulk of the responsibility. With that being said, that does not exonerate I or anyone else from complying, right? Now, it's not foolproof. You just have bad officers out there. And it's unfortunate, and I'm not saying that just lightly. Yeah, it's unfortunate and it needs to be dealt with when it is observed. But in a lot of these situations, I see a common trend where people are approached and or apprehended by police officers, and they feel as though they do not need to comply. They feel as though if they resist enough that the police will stand up and say, oh, Black Lives Matter. Okay, I get it. I'll back off, right? And I won't touch you. No, that's not how it works. It's not. I'm fairly confident that if this individual complied, if he relaxed himself, if he just allowed the police to do their job, that he would still be alive right now. That's just my assertion of it. But it just seems like the genesis of this Black Lives Matter movement has resulted in a lot of people feeling as though they do not need to comply with police officers. And when an encounter with police ends in a catastrophic way, regardless of if it was the police's doing or the individual had something in their system that contributed to their death, everyone just looks at the police officers and says, well, you used a gun, that's not okay. Or you didn't use a gun, you used a taser, that's not okay. Or you used your body to apprehend this person, that's not okay. It's just never satisfactory in terms of how they operate because everyone is just solely looking at them and not looking at the individual who is being apprehended and saying, hey, yes, it is unfortunate, but two things can be right at the exact same time. Yes, it's unfortunate what happened. At the exact same time, you can comply, and there's a strong chance that this will not happen. Now, I'm no stranger to why the police were a thing years and years and years ago, right? I'm no stranger to how they operated a mere 30 years ago. But in the general sense, racism is just not tolerated here. Now, that might be an unpopular opinion, but it is kind of true. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen. That does not mean it doesn't occur. But we have entire movements that condemn it. I, as a black person, get various benefits for simply being black. I can get scholarships in college, as I am now, for being a minority. There's a whole month dedicated to people who look like me. A white person doesn't even have to say anything racist. They can just say something that has the word black in it, or boy in it, or anything of the sort with no racist intent, maybe just stating something, and their whole career is over. So, no, we do not live in a country that tolerates racism as it did 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. But this idea that we live in a racist country at the moment where we tolerate a culture of racism, that implants the idea in people's minds that anytime a situation like this happens, where white officers interact with black people and it goes south, that the only explanation is because the police officers were racist and they don't like black people and they just got bored and said, what black person can we hunt down today? That's just not the case like most people believe it to be. And it's unfortunate because it takes attention away from the real problem. There's just a lot of inadequacies within the police force in regards to training and the amount of time it takes to become a police officer. It'll take me longer to go to law school or to become a doctor than it does to become a police officer, to become a part of a military, essentially, that is deployed into civilization and that is tasked with protecting and serving people, maintaining the peace while carrying firearms and attack dogs and being able to run red lights because we turn our sirens on. Like, these aren't things that should just be taken lightly. So the fact that it does not take long at all, the fact that the physical requirements are not much more strict, etc., that is not a racist issue because black and white people and Asian people and Mexican people and all different kinds of races and ethnicities of people, they go through the essentially the same process, the same training process, depending on the department. So it's not a full-blown racist issue that these things keep happening. Doesn't mean there aren't racist police officers, but we're speaking in generalities. In the general sense, a lot of the inadequacies within the police force stem from poor training at so many levels of it. And that applies to every single police officer who goes through that process. Now, when I look at this, do I see poor training? I mean, I don't really know, right? They're telling him, I'm going to tase you. They told him multiple times. I think they told him like 9 times. If you do not comply, if you keep resisting, we're going to tase you. And he's just not complying. Now, I'm not there, so I don't know what their thought process is in regards to when they feel satisfied. They tase him once. Okay, is he chill enough to be able to put him in handcuffs, right? Or maybe they're still wrestling with him after 3 tases. Like, it's hard to determine, but it's easy to label these people as such because of the unfortunate conclusion, i.e. his death. And it is easier for these people to just say he died because the police tased him to death. That is a sick thing to do, right? To weaponize black struggle, right? Because guess what? 30, 40, 50 years ago, police officers would just attack black people just because they genuinely had nothing better to do. That was their MO. Is if you were black and you felt like you wanted to step up, all right, well, they're going to come after you.
Ready, set, go. I got blackmailed.
So in this day and age where you even think about being racist and you're snuffed out by society as a whole, the idea that these social media companies and these journalists, quote unquote journalists, the powers that may be, whoever runs the show, these social justice warriors, right? The fact that they use real black struggle and weaponize it to push forth some agenda or to defund the police or to abolish the police, as Colin Kaepernick would say. It's sick because then it's like, how do we really know if this was real racism or if it was just inadequate training or if the police officers handled the situation as best as they could and the fault rests on the individual who is trying to be apprehended? It's hard to tell because every single time it happens, racism. But like I said, it is evident that we're being controlled because I've been waiting for it. I've been waiting for people to go into the streets and protest some riot, right? People get pissed off. That's what I've been waiting for, and I haven't seen it at the scale that I saw it almost 3 years ago now. That's because the people who run the show did not say go. They did not. It's not an election season. No one needs to win an office at the moment and use a certain demographic of people to do that. There's not much going on. Therefore, this story will not gain as much traction as it would have 3 years ago. It's unfortunate that this is the way it is, but it is important to look at this and spend just a little bit of time reading between the lines and seeing what really happened instead of taking this stuff at face value, because these people will tell you what they want you to hear. Because if you read this, you're not even going to be interested in looking at the body cam footage. You're not going to be interested in reading eyewitness reports, right? And I'm not saying you got to go down and drop a full report like you're about to plead a case in regards to the situation. But it doesn't take that long to look up what actually happened. Instead of reading some opinion piece from people who are obviously biased and have no morals, because they will stop at nothing to take any story, any situation that happens, no matter how tragic it is, and twist it so much to the point where it falls in line with whatever narrative that they want to push forth. This one being that all white cops are racist. If you are approached by a white cop as a black person, I mean, just pray to God nothing happens. It's unfortunate. That's what they push, right? But they're smart. I'll give them that, right? If you don't focus on the real issue, it'll never get solved. Therefore, you always have this in your back pocket, right? So you can run that's basically what it's run off of, right? Organizations like BLM, they're run off of this. If you address the bulk of issues within the police force in regards to just inadequate training, a lot of this goes out the window. Is there really a need for a massive social justice movement if these issues are fixed? No. But if you keep saying that it's just racism, I mean, you have a business that can stand the test of time, and it has, and it will. These people hate capitalism like it's nobody's business, but they use it more than anybody that I've ever seen, because to them this is a business. Rest in peace to Keenan Anderson. But for the love of God, when you get into an interaction with the police, just comply.